Welcome to episode 2, everyone. I had to split this one up. Anyway, back to what I was saying. The only thing that's concerning about George Pickens is that he only had 4 catches. In week 1, he only had 5. So overall, it's kind of a gamble if you want to start him. However, if there's any time to start him, it's going to be when Deontay Johnson is down, which is now. So overall, it's your risk to take. But overall, he had a very good night, as it was. But the catches are a little concerning. You had some good news with Jalen Warren, where he's starting to get more snaps. He's starting to get more attention overall. He had 6 rushes for 20 yards. He had 4 catches for 66 yards. Like I said, he was outperforming Najee Harris around the board. So overall, I wouldn't necessarily start him yet. But if Najee Harris keeps playing like this and Warren keeps going off, the Steelers are going to have no choice other than to play Warren more often. But just keep an eye on that. I wouldn't start him right away by any means. You had Jawan Johnson, or is it Jalen Johnson? I think it's Jawan Johnson. He really didn't do much. There is some upside with the Raiders pretty much having no run game outside of Taysom Hill now, in that Jawan Johnson might do better than he's done in the first 2 weeks, but overall, I wouldn't trust him to be a true tight end 1 as it is, but I guess he's an okay backup. It's about the best I can say there, to be honest. Then we had Karen's husband and PMC Wagner, and PMC should have lost the game just like Pussy, but Pussy and PMC are just paying off these refs. Can't have shit in Detroit. Anyway, PMC actually had nobody on his entire roster from last night do anything. Karen had Chris Olave, who did pretty good. He did really bad in the first half. Like, he barely did anything in the first half. But overall, he had 6 catches for 86 yards. Really good. If he's able to go out there and get a touchdown, like, a lot better as well. You know, that's the Saints' problem, is they can't score. They seem to like to get into field goal range, but they don't feel like scoring touchdowns. That seems to be their big issue. So overall, he's pretty good to have. Not much bad to say. Then Pat Freiermuth, he did He went in the red. He's not as good as he was last year, but oh, geez, I didn't realize that. I thought he actually did more than that. Oh, never mind. That's concerning as hell. Yeah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize that last night. I thought he did more than 1 catch for 2 yards. So what that means is, I don't know if you caught that he had like no stats at all. That means that out of his 6.2 points, 4 of his points were 2 tackles solo. Jesus Christ, that is awful. Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, Karen. That's a huge red flag. Maybe next week he does better. He probably will, but at least for this week, that's a huge concern. I would be worried about that. Maybe he goes out there and does better next week. But damn, you're over here starting a middle linebacker at your tight end, Karen. But all right. I think he'll do better, like I said, though. I wouldn't be too concerned about it. Just keep an eye on it. And then you also had Chuba Hubbard, who isn't anything special, but he's starting to get more involved from Miles Sanders, where he's actually going in there and taking the receiving backfield. And in a PPR league, that's actually way more valuable than the running backfield, as weird as that sounds, where you're getting all these catches. So keep an eye on him. I'm not saying he's necessarily like go out there and start him, but you might actually have a solid backup. And especially if Miles Sanders ever goes down, he might be pretty good to start. And overall, that was the results of week 2. We got, I think the only remaining 2-0 people are Pussy fucking Evan, of all people. I don't even want to talk about it, dude. Biggest fluke of all time. And Booty Basher. So if you went into Vegas and bet before the season started that Booty Basher and Evan would be 2 of the 2-0 people, come collect your money, because I don't think anyone saw this one coming. And I think that's it for the 2-0 people. The only people without a winner, J-Bay, Mr. Steeler Girl, and Toxic. I expected that from J-Bay, but Mr. Steeler Girl and Toxic are kind of dropping the ball here. And then we have a lot of 1-1 teams in between. Overall, things are starting to shape up. We're going to have a good week 3, I think. And now let's start talking about what happened in the games themselves. Okay. So we'll start with the Panthers-Browns. Derek Carr didn't do great. He really didn't do too much as it was. He got 228 yards. He was pretty accurate for what it was worth, but overall, that's not going to do great in fantasy. I wouldn't be too concerned about it, though. I think he'll do better in upcoming weeks, especially with Kamara maybe returning. He's more of a receiving back anyway. For at least week 3, and this is to people out there like, say, Pussy, for example, or maybe Karen's husband, or anybody who thinks they have an issue with consistency at tight end. If you don't trust your tight end to go out there and get at least 6+ points on a consistent basis, I would consider picking up Taysom Hill, who's considered a tight end in fantasy. And the reason I consider that is when their running backs are hurt, they tend to line him up and just use him as a straight up running back, as you see with the 9 catches and 75 yards. And the thing about him, too, is he doesn't line up as a running back. He lines up as a quarterback and just takes straight up QB draws. So he has the capability of passing as well, which makes him a really unique option. So overall, especially for this week 3, it might actually be considering, maybe benching Kyle Pitts or benching, someone like that you cannot trust on a week-to-week basis if you need consistency for a game you're playing. And maybe giving Taysom Hill a try, because he probably will have around the same consistency as those guys who you can't trust to get more than 6 points, while also having an insanely high upside of say 20, 30 points if he ends up, getting a lot of snaps like that. So it might be worth mentioning, like I said. Then you had, as you see there, you had a catch. But anyway, then you had with your rushing game, Taysom Hill was pretty much the whole running back core. Tony Jones had 2 touchdowns at the goal line, but other than that, he really didn't do shit. Jamal Williams got hurt. Shaheed, Olave, and Thomas all did pretty solid at the receiving game. Other than that, there really isn't much to talk about. The defense, you saw Marcus May as the safety, who actually is worth mentioning. A few years ago, he was one of the best safeties in fantasy. Not one of the best, but probably like top 10. Where he was very consistent, but injuries keep getting to him overall. Keep an eye on him if he keeps playing like this. I'd say he's actually probably a pickup and startable player. But that was a very good night for him. A sack, 6 tackles, an assist as well. Demario Davis did his thing with the sack as well. Pete Werner had 7 tackles where he kind of got screwed with the assists. Other than that, there isn't really much worth mentioning. I don't think there's a few guys with a sack, but nothing really like consistent. Then, like I said, the Saints seem to really be struggling with touchdowns this year, so keep an eye on that group guy. He might be the next Will Lutz, where he gets a lot of field goals. With the Panthers, Bryce Young, it was just like Derek Carr, where he was accurate but didn't really do too much. He got a touchdown at least, which kind of salvaged his fantasy night, but he's really not doing much to score fantasy points, which is concerning. Chuba Hubbard, in terms of the run game, it's still Miles Sanders' backfield almost entirely for the run game. But for the receiving game, when it comes to these running backs, it's looking like it's going to be Chuba Hubbard that's going to be easing his way into it. Adam Thielen did really good with the return of DJ Chark. Jonathan Mingo did He's a rookie, so he wasn't like a highly taken rookie. It's nothing special, but he had a few catches. Hayden Hurst didn't do nearly as good as he did week 1, but overall that's not really that mentionable. I think somebody might have picked him up, but I don't think he's going to do great throughout the season overall as it is. Let's see here. This is something worth mentioning. Replacing Shaq Thompson, who's going to be on IR, is Kamu Grugier-Hill, who was actually one of the better tacklers in the league 2 years ago. He did pretty dang good. I remember that. He went to Houston, and then Christian Kirksey came in, and he started just kind of falling off. So keep an eye on him, but don't pick him up or anything like that yet. But if he's able to keep putting up stats like he had there, kind of like Marcus May, he's someone to keep an eye out for as we go on through the season. Overall, that's probably about it in terms of what I think is meant. Von Bell as well had a pick, but other than that, there really isn't much worth mentioning here. Half sack for Houston and Gross Matos, but yeah, nothing that's really going to be consistent. Von Bell from the Bengals had a few really good games, and this seems to be one of the ones he's going to have for Carolina, so just keep an eye on him, like I said. But overall, I'd say the highlights are definitely Grugier-Hill and whatever the guy's name is. I'm already forgetting. Marcus May. Overall, yeah, just keep an eye on them. And these are just two very struggling offenses with very good defenses. That's pretty much what this game was like. It was field goal central, and then the Panthers scored a touchdown on accident, I'm pretty sure. And the Saints got a few touchdowns at the end of the game. So overall, it wasn't really that exciting of a game. The main event was the Steelers Browns. I think pretty much all of America would agree on that. This game was just kind of a slugfest, to be honest, between two teams that someone had to win, and it looked like it had to have been the Saints. Now let's look at the Steelers and Browns. This game was a little bit more exciting, although nobody likes to see all the injuries that took place during it. Like I already said, very first play of the game was a pick six for Alex Highsmith on the Steelers. We'll get to him in a minute. There were two pick sixes or two defensive touchdowns for the Steelers, which won them the game. This was all the defense. The offense on the Steelers just did nothing. The Browns' offense struggled, especially after Chubb was gone. But I think if they have time to scheme around with Jeremy Ford, I think they can pick it up with Deshaun Watson. I keep saying that. That's pretty much the key to this week's WWD is anybody on that Cleveland offense is looking like it's looking like a very good situation to have anybody on their team for fantasy except for Nick Chubb. So if you're toxic, you're shitbag titty fuck of the week, to quote the one dude. I already forget his name too. But anyway, yeah, fuck you, toxic. Everybody else wins. Um, Overall, Deshaun Watson didn't do great. He played like shit, to be honest. Like he was missing passes left and right, missing open guys left and right, making bad decisions left and right. You name it. He's still getting a touchdown and 235 yards, which is enough to keep him fantasy relevant. But like I said, he'll have to start playing better. But at least he will have a lot more chances to play better, like I've been saying, which is why everything's looking good for him. Nick Chubb out for the season, probably. That's not promised, though. Jeremy Ford is looking like he might go in there and do really good, like I told was talking about with Big Yawners. Go ahead and start him if you have him in any leagues. He'll do really good for you, I'm betting. Elijah Moore got a carry as well. Deshaun Watson also scrambled 6 times, but I don't think that was a good thing. It was just because of the Steelers' D-line, particularly TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith went out there and did really good last night. They pretty much feasted. Amari Cooper did really good at that receiving core, and then David Njoku had an okay game, like I said, but it was just that fumble that cost him. Jeremy Ford also had 3 catches for 25 yards and a touchdown. So overall, yep, definitely start Jeremy Ford. It's going to be hard for me to tell you not to start him. The only situation I'd say maybe don't start him is if he's playing like the Cowboys or 49ers or some ridiculous offense. Or defense, I mean. Other than that, there isn't really too much worth mentioning out of this offense. Defense, you had Grant Delpit, who was pretty much the highlight of it, but he's already taken by MILF, who had 4 tackles solo, 2 assists, and then a pick. And he also had a fumble recovery as well, but it doesn't say on this. Myles Garrett really didn't do much. He was actually held in check last night in terms of fantasy. That was a bit of a shocker. He usually does pretty good against the Steelers. That's not anything to be concerned about, though. The Steelers were pretty much double teaming him the whole game. And yeah, that's pretty much all there is to talk about here. It was a game where the Steelers defense won the mitt, plus Deshaun Watson being complete dog shit. It was overall kind of a slugfest, kind of like the other game, but at least there was big moments to keep you in this one. So yeah, there really isn't too much to talk about in these games. That's why I spent so much more time focusing on the matchups and the players going into these upcoming weeks. We'll talk about it more when I make the start bench suggestions and the free agency pickups or recommendations for tomorrow. Overall, I just overall think this was a kind of lackluster few games with not really much fantasy relevant going on other than injuries and stuff like that and what they're going to affect, which isn't really something that's like great news, but overall, if you have those players that are surrounding the guy who got hurt, it usually ends up being good news. But overall, I hope you guys enjoyed the 2 episodes of WWD, which I had to split up a little bit. And I'll catch you tomorrow for the free agency / start bench video.